Prime Minister, do you think that migration has economic benefits for New Zealand?
Oh, it's not even the matter that I think that, I know that to be the case. So if we didn't have migration in New Zealand, for a starting point, we would have population decline. And countries that have population decline really struggle to pay for all of the things that their existing population wants. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is that we get economic growth as a result of it. So it's not just a matter of population decline, our population's increasing, and that brings a lot of benefits. But also, you know, when migrants come to New Zealand, they bring skills, they bring capital, they bring the right attitude, they bring a diversity of culture, they bring a different perspective sometimes in the way we view things. So it's everything from our food is better to the sorts of celebrations we have are different and actually, frankly, very interesting.
So, granted that you believe and you know that it has huge benefits, do you think your government is pushing this message aggressively?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you look at the parliamentary makeup at the moment, you've always had Winston Peters being anti-migration and anti-migrants. Increasingly, actually, and the disappointing thing is that Labor's been moving more in that space. And it's really surprising because Labor historically had been a political party that had supported migration quite heavily. So there's been quite a change that we've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years, and we think it's really political desperation more than that they fundamentally believe that.
They don't have the pulse of the economic scenario of the country, that without migration?
I think that their polling is so bad, they're desperate to get their numbers up, and they think that by pushing an anti-migration message they might get more voting support, and I don't think they will, because firstly, I don't think New Zealanders would believe it, and secondly, they wouldn't believe it from Labour, and the third thing is that there's a big migrant voting population base. So New Zealand's home to over 250,000 Chinese, 160,000 Indians. You know, they're a large base of people who will use their democratic right to vote in an election as well.
So let's come to the issues that migrants face. For example, the biggest issue, and your government actually came up with a code recently about international students being cheated by their agents, not getting proper jobs here, huge underemployment.
Yes.
What does your government think?
Well, firstly, export education, so effectively foreign students coming to New Zealand across a range of different parts of the education sector, whether it be schools to tertiary qualifications, private training establishments, they all add up to about $2.3 billion worth of economic activity. So they employ a lot of people and they provide a lot of opportunities, and they're great for economic growth. I think, you know, the challenge here is always to make sure that we both deliver for the student what they want, so they're not getting ripped off by either poor providers or not getting the qualifications they themselves need. And equally, New Zealand needs to know that their qualifications are accurate, you know, that their visas are right, that they're going to honour their commitments. So I think, look, there's been a bit of tidying up of some of those visas when it comes to Indian students, but the overall trajectory of the number of people coming to New Zealand's rising.
Similar thing happened with the dairy workers for Philippines as well, right?
Yeah, so what happened there was that we believe that one rogue agent misrepresented the skill level of the individual Filipino workers. Now, we would have probably been within our legal rights to throw those workers out, but in fact, actually, even if they didn't have the qualifications it was really around experience of what they said they had. On farm, they were doing a magnificent job, and we don't believe the individual people misrepresented the case. We think that the agency did. So we've chosen to take the path of, I think for the most part, allowing those workers to stay. They're a very important part of the dairy sector in New Zealand. Filipinos are great workers, and I think sometimes in practice things often work better than they do on a piece of paper.
So last question is about your government decided that people should come to regions. You started giving more residency points. But when you go to South Island, you find that traditionally, historically, it's not very diverse.
Correct.
Right? So you have lots of churches, but you don't have lots of temples and mosques, you know?
Yeah.
So does your government think that and in our centers, because this is done by centers, things that people find difficult to adapt culturally in the South Island? Do you have any plan? Okay,
so when we look at the survey data that we do with migrants that come to New Zealand, the vast overwhelming bulk of them have a good experience and feel as though they're fitting in. So about 84%, I think, on our most recent survey would indicate they're having a good experience in New Zealand. Now, 16% is still a lot that say they aren't, but I think you'll always get a group of people who, feel as though the experience is a bit overwhelming or just get a bad experience from someone.
Things like your government can sponsor multicultural festivals in the regions, or maybe grant money to community groups to build up their own places of worship, things like that.
Yeah, and I think the truth is that the South Island has always been a lot more homogenous Pākehā population. Even the Maori population is of much lower numbers here in the South Island. So you're absolutely right. We can do more. So, making sure that the Diwali festivals, or making sure that the lights, the lantern festivals, all of those things are happening, and that people actually see that they're great celebrations of fun and different cultures. They're not intimidated by them. They actually enjoy them. So I think if you look at Auckland, I mean, I live there most of the time, obviously, when I'm not in Wellington, and things like the Lantern Festival. My son goes to the Lantern Festival, and he doesn't go to half the other things that get put on by Auckland Council. And he goes because the food's good and he has a bit of fun. He wanders around, looks at the lanterns, and he enjoys it. So
in Christchurch Lantern Festival, 50,000 people attended this year, which is 1/6.
It's huge. I know, it's huge. So one thing I would always say to migrants is that everywhere in the world migration has its challenges. Even if you go to Singapore, there's pushback to other Chinese migrants coming to Singapore. And there's always those natural concerns. But over time, New Zealand's a country of migration. My mother was Austrian, my father was English. We're a country that's welcomed people. And I think we do a massive disservice to New Zealand if we start turning our back on people. Of course, we have to be able to make sure the people that come can add to our country, either because they're young or they're hardworking or they've got qualifications or they've got capital, whatever it might be. But we shouldn't listen to the small minority who are opposed to migration. I think we've got to listen to the large majority, many of whom are silent, who would say our country is better served by that migration. And yes, we have to give them reassurance that people will fit in. And if you look at what's happening in a place like France, one of the reasons they've got issues is they've ghettoised people and they haven't integrated people into their communities. And if you do that, then you will get disaffected young people. So we have to do a good job of making sure that people get jobs, get houses, get integrated into schools, and their families and the next generation will always be better equipped to cope as Kiwis that have grown up in our system.
So as Prime Minister of New Zealand, all potential migrants and migrants who are already here, what's your message to them?
Well, I think the simple message is, to be blunt, if they want to see a continuation of an open, diverse, accepting country, I think our government is the only political party that voices their message. And I think, it's really important, if they want to see a continuation of that when we have elections, they actually come out and support us, because a lot of migrants don't vote. And actually in this country, if you do vote, it's anonymous, no one knows. But democracy is something that's treasured in New Zealand. We've got one of the longest unbroken democracies in the world, and I think people should embrace that.
It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much.